everybody. This is Craig from the Pacific War Channel. Yet again, we are here, but it's kind of a special episode. It's been a long time since we've done this, but on Echoes of War, we have kind of a side project that comes up now and again called Politically Incorrect History. I'm joined here by my co-host Gaurav. How are you?
Hey, Craig. Great to be on here, and I'm quite interested because this is the first time I'm joining you in such a format. So
Yeah,
it's a new adventure for me.
So, for the various audience members that listen to this on YouTube or on any of the audio podcast platforms, you might be aware of this because it's happened sporadically over the course of a few years. More or less, it was just me and a few of my friends after like work. We would just come over to my place, get a little bit drunk, and just ramble about anything related to history or just what we were doing, and that was a podcast. So that's kind of the idea behind here, and it's the title says it all. It's it's meant to be kind of more of a gag and not as serious. There's no scripts in this. We have nothing planned. We don't know what we're going to be talking about, and like I even told Gaurav before we started this, like, don't plan, just let whatever happens. But stating all that, I still have to do my shameless plug before we jump into it. If you want to further support the channel, please consider checking out my YouTube membership over at the Pacific War Channel on YouTube, or my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War Channel. By joining either of these, you get access to the exclusive podcast series, and it's 36 or 37 episodes and ongoing at this point. You get early access to all the content I make and voting rights to the subjects I will tackle next. And I'll say it here, in one of the podcasts I do for Kings and Generals, somebody accused me of being an AI system because of my ad read and how robotic I sound because I say it probably once a day for the past like 3 years, the same read over and over and over again. So yeah, I am not a robot to that one guy.
I think then are we going to get to the point where we're going to put disclaimers in the podcast screen that this is not AI generated content?
It is not. There was talks at one point by a boss of mine wondering if we should AI me into some podcasts, and we didn't do it. And thankfully, because I've actually listened to a few audiobooks that use an AI for the speech because it wasn't properly done by Audible or whatever, it's jarring. It's not as good as it could be. They need to improve them. But yeah, it's 10 hours.
It's going to take time, right? Because that's just the nature of AI. It just needs more data.
Yeah, it's just AI can never figure out how to do a proper pause on a sentence. It's much better, and every month, it gets better, but it's not there yet. But yeah, since this is an aimless podcast, I thought it was a bit of an icebreaker. I would just ramble about, the work that I'm currently doing. For those who don't know, I write for some other YouTube channels. One of them is Kings and Generals, and it's behind their paywall, but actually a lot of the work I'm doing for them is behind the paywall for some reason. I've been writing multiple series. I wrote a Russo-Japanese War series. I wrote the Italian campaign, the North Africa campaign. God, what else did I do? The Russian Civil War. Not my best work. I am not a specialist. I'm not proud of that one. It's not as good as the other ones. And I was asked recently to do something that was alien a little bit to me because I'm considered the modern warfare guy at Kings and Generals. A lot of the World War I, World War II episodes, it's me. They asked me to do World War I from the perspective of the Ottoman Empire, which it's interesting. It really kind of flips the coin on its head, because if you ever read about that, yeah,
the dead man's getting dead.
Yeah, the old man of the sick old man of Europe, and but it has to be from the Ottomans' perspective, and it had to encompass everything that was considered not just the Ottoman Empire, but like the Middle East. So anything that they'd be involved in. And boy, oh boy, they wanted it in a chronological order, and they didn't want to subdivide it by region, because I had originally said, hey, why don't we do this region by region, and we'll forget about the chronology, because this is going to be too hectic. You got Suez Canal, you got Gallipoli, you got the Persian campaign, you got the Caucasus campaign. It's all over the place. It's honestly crazy. You have internal revolts. You have the Armenian Genocide, which was I had to talk about, which is a fun one, because you get a lot of angry messages when you bring up the Armenian Genocide, but I think I did it justice. But yeah, so I've been working on that for 2 months now, think I'm halfway through the series. We just finished up 1915. Really, it's a full year, that one. But I had to condense Gallipoli into 3 episodes. And it's not the full episode, so it's like maybe you're talking a 2,500 word script, about 700,
That
maybe
just
800 words.
doesn't do so much justice for the scope of the Gallipoli campaign.
Visually, because what people don't know is when, at least for the type of animation that this is, the footnotes are longer than the actual script itself, because I have to tell the animator, hey, this is what unit was here, they're attacking what hill, blah, 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 blah. So visually, it looks incredible because there's just so much going on in the Gallipoli campaign, but tragic how much I had to summarize. It's pretty brutal. But whenever I write these things, I write about, I don't know, a script that's 8,000 words long. Usually I keep that script for myself, change it up a little bit, and I turn it into a podcast. Sometimes we do here on Echoes of War. So once I'm done a few more of those episodes, get ready. I think we'll do a series on the Ottoman Empire during World War One. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, we have a lot on our pipeline right now that we're discussing. So yeah, let's figure it out.
Yeah, we're
Because
sitting on a
I
lot.
really, interested in the Battle of the Suez that took place in World War One. It's quite it's not even mentioned, because when you get to that area of the front, you only hear Gallipoli, you hear a little bit of the Middle East and Lawrence of Arabia, Ottomans fighting in the Caucasus front against the Russian forces, and that's pretty much how they view that entire theater of operations, you could say.
In a brutal summary, one of the most interesting things about the entire theater is, for lack of better words, it starts off extremely violent and it completely dies in a matter of about a year and a half. Like you said, the largest campaign is initially the Russian campaign in the Caucasus, and there's like one major battle at Cinemas, and after that it just collapsed. Like the Ottomans are so devastated, not by combat fatalities, by improper winter care. They annihilate their own army by not properly. They have no medical facilities to take care of their men, and there was an issue. Their men were led to believe if they went to field hospitals, they would probably die because of, I guess, not sanitary conditions or something. So they basically just didn't seek care and they took their chances out in the field. A lot of them died because of that, and the majority died of cold-related stuff. They marched through winter conditions and they were not prepared for it. And yeah, they
It's
never
like it's one of
recovered.
those misconceptions, right? Everyone thinks Napoleon's army was destroyed by the Russian winter, when it was actually the Russian summer that was wrecking
Yeah,
his army.
yeah. And like you said, for the Suez Canal campaign, they try, because basically the Germans wanted the Ottoman Empire to do something that would help them out in the Western Front. And closing the Suez Canal would have just absolutely devastated Britain, because, all of the men and supplies are coming through that area. They'd have to go, across Africa if not.
It's from a logistics point of view, you're adding like what? It was 3 weeks of extra sailing in the time of World War Two, when the engines have improved. So probably can assume 4 weeks, 4.5
Yeah,
weeks at the bare minimum.
yeah.
And Australia is contributing a lot to
India,
the
Anzac, yeah,
the
even
Anzacs, the
Africa for
Indian.
that matter. Yeah,
Because after the Gallipoli front, they actually get deployed to the Western Front, because the Australian Corps, if I'm not mistaken, towards the end of World War One on the Western Front, I think was the single largest formation that
hmm.
at the core level. Like only armies were larger, and I think at its
Yeah,
peak strength under John Monash, who is an absolute legend to me, the Australian Corps had over 110,000 soldiers.
damn. Yeah, I mean, it's very sad what happened to Anzac forces, because the Gallipoli is the unmitigated disaster that everyone thinks it is. it wasn't supposed to go the way it was. Of course, there wasn't supposed to be a land campaign. It was supposed to be just what they would call a naval force. They were going to force their way up through the Dardanelles, and they were going to use a bunch of outdated, obsolete warships. A lot of them were actually set to be scrapped the following year, and
I
unfortunately,
believe it was Churchill's idea who wanted
yes.
to just use these.
Well, actually, it was another guy. I forget the name of the captain who came up with the
Oh,
idea,
yeah.
but Churchill fully endorsed it, so it became
And yeah,
his.
at that time, Churchill was First Lord of the Admiralty, which, as the senior most naval officer in Britain, that carried a lot of weight. And on prima facie, it's not a bad idea.
No, it
If
was actually a good idea, but the
you
captain,
might as well,
like the
yeah. And I think the attack that plan even came about because the French and British just assumed that they just show up with a few battleships and the Ottomans would just surrender. And they lost, I think, three battleships to mines before any land campaign even took place.
it was an unmitigated
Battleships,
disaster. I
yeah,
mean,
and
what
battleships are
ended up
pretty expensive.
well, yeah, they're expensive, but the thing is, the majority of the ships were either old and obsolete, like they were too slow to do any fleet action, so they couldn't be part of the Grand Fleet against the Germans.
That's
So
what we
there was
mentioned
no
in
use.
Judgment.
Yeah, they were going to be used. They couldn't use some of these even for escort duties for some of the fatter ships, so they were absolutely useless. A lot of them were going to be scrapped for just raw metal to be used for other things the next year. So it was a perfect plan for like, what do we do with these ships, right? The thing that got screwed up that Churchill could have never considered was these captains, because these are older ships, have been on these ships for how long? They had like emotional attachments to these ships. They were extremely unwilling to just sacrifice them, which was the whole purpose of it. The idea was to force their way quickly through the strait. And like you said, they knew they were going to lose ships to mines. They had minesweepers, but they weren't properly bombarding the enemy to protect the minesweepers. And initially, they were using like fishermen with fishing trawlers to try and minesweep, and that didn't work because they got scared and they just like didn't go in. And they didn't think that the Germans would be helping the Ottomans. So there was German officers who were manning a lot of like it was full German crews for some of the artillery, and they were knocking out the Entente warships pretty bad. And yeah, as far as casualties are concerned, the Ottomans took nothing. Like the forts barely got hit anywhere. It was a failure. And then yeah,
There's usually that saying, right? Uh, Attacking an entrenched position on land with sea vessels is not really a good idea.
no, and a lot of they had what you would call mobile artillery. This is what the Germans brought to the table. So of course they have batteries and the coastal fort stuff. Those the Entente warships could hit. The Germans took a lot of their heavy artillery. They put it behind mountain ranges and stuff, so it couldn't be seen. But they had observers on the hills to look at the ships. So basically, they could hit the enemy couldn't hit them, and they couldn't locate them because they're going to move their artillery around. So it took a very small force of Germans to train and help the Ottomans to be able to just completely desolate the Entente warships. And then it was someone's bright idea. It's like, oh, the whole purpose of this is to go through the straits and then just amphibiously assault Istanbul. Why don't we just do a land campaign to open the straits so we can do that? It's like the whole point was to not do that, and they can't afford to send like 100,000 troops to this secondary theater. And yeah, so then you get Gallipoli, and it's an unmitigated disaster. The Ottomans despite losing an incredible amount, the casualties are terrible. The Ottomans are able to defend. Yeah, so if you're looking on YouTube right now, he's putting up a map. You can see the two landings. The Anzac forces were in the north. The French and the British were in the south at Cape Helles. And either side did well. There was another landing at the end that's a little bit further north of the Anzac position where they thought that they would finally break through. Never happens. The Seri Bauer range is merciless. They're attacking
Yeah,
pillboxes and stuff.
I think the true victor of Gallipoli you could call were the flies.
Yeah, both sides. The casualties are unbelievable in this, but
Well,
the
to be fair,
Ottomans won.
that's pretty much World War I in a nutshell.
Yeah. What's funny is when I was writing these scripts, 95% of every battle the Ottomans take part in isn't just a loss, it's devastating for them. Like, and it's humiliating how badly they do. This is like one of the only campaigns where they they took more losses than the Entente, but they won the battle. And there are some legendary figures, Kamal Pasha and all that, come out from this specific battle, and then they're going to lead
Is there
revolutions
really
later.
a greater Turkish hero other than Mustafa Kemal from this battle?
Unless you want to mention all the other pashas who were 100% responsible for the Armenian Genocide and kept their meeting minutes about it, which is what's crazy is they were boasting about the genocide they were doing, and a lot of the information about the genocide is from them.
You can't talk about it today, right?
Yeah, because the current country that we won't name that doesn't acknowledge it isn't doing a genocide against Kurds at the moment. It's not ironic. But it's one of the most. I think this is arguably even more well documented than maybe even the Holocaust, because we have all of the meeting minutes from the individuals in power. So, like Enver Pasha, for example, who boasts to his allies in Germany and other places.
I think he was like kind of like in an equivalent of prime minister, right?
Yeah. It's a small cabal of these leadership characters who, what do you call it? They thought that if they sent the orders without writing, that they just wouldn't come back to them. But then at the same time, they're boasting to like their Central Power allies about what they're doing. And who, if you know your history, one of the most famous things that Adolf Hitler said in some of his earlier speeches, who talks about the Armenian Genocide. The reason why he's bringing that up is because the Germans were fully aware of what was going on. They didn't like it, but the Ottomans were telling them and boasting about it. Giving them ideas, by the way.
One of the greatest things, like the figures I love that came out of the Gallipoli is this gentleman whose portrait I'm about to share. General John Monash from the Australians. And I think he deserves to be called the most innovative general of World War One.
Yeah.
And I think he actually saved a lot of, at the Gallipoli campaign, for a lot of the 4th Brigade had a better chance, given since he joined his service as a reservist, worked as an engineer, so kind of helped fortify his section of the beachhead far better. And he tried to do whatever he could for the soldiers. Granted, I remember reading like the Anzacs, they would document that within 20 seconds of opening like food or something, like they have to cover it or eat near smoke to get the flies away, otherwise their food's gone.
Yeah, that's gross.
But John Monash, the way he directed the Battle of Hemel, that is amazing, because that is the first battle of World War One where he used a short and heavy bombardment with a creeping barrage, with the use of tanks to carry supplies for the infantry, and also bombers were dropping not bombs but supplies to the frontline soldiers. And he planned it so well, the Battle of Hemel, that he told High Command that the operation is going to take 90 minutes. Do you want to know how long it took?
How long?
93. Yeah, considering you would have generals who would say, oh yeah, we'd be in this capital city the next 2 weeks and get bogged down in stalemate for years. This is pretty impressive. And one of the things I really liked what he did was he ensured that supplies were ready and there was a courier train so that at least one hot meal was sent to the frontline troops in the action. And because usually the frontline soldiers would be having their dry rations in a can or something, right? Which will just be like, meat in a can and the biscuits or such with their water caskets. He was able to organize the supply so that they get, one hot meal at least at the front line, which I think that definitely would have boosted morale. And I think it was after this that the British Army really started that strategy that the Supply Corps would choose in World War II, where frontline soldiers would be given one hot meal a day, regardless where they were. I think
Yeah, I
probably if
mean,
you were not, as long as you were not like serving under Wingate
turtle eggs and onions.
and walking
Oh my
naked and
god.
having your officers check your diarrhea.
Yeah, I probably should do a biography of Wingate. I mean, he's been done to death because he's like the most one of the most bizarre characters ever seen in World War II. But it's always fun to talk about his craziness. And like, I love the primary sources where people are like, he has this watch and alarms would go off all day. We have no idea what the purpose of the watch is. Oh, didn't he wear an alarm clock at one point? I can't remember.
I think he had several watches with the alarms that were set to go off at different
Yeah.
times, as you mentioned. And I think he had like a necklace of some vegetables, and I think
Well, he
one
had
was
an
also
onion
half eaten.
necklace.
Yeah, and one of those onions was like half eaten or something.
Yeah, because he
And
believed it would. Anyways, yeah.
yeah, and not to mention he would apparently be wandering around camp completely naked.
Yeah, he was a nudist. Big time.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure British High Command absolutely loved it. Sarcasm implied.
I mean, this guy, the best part is like clearly massive bipolar problem. He was very bipolar. He would have his ups and downs. So you didn't know who you were dealing with. And when he was out in the jungle, when he got depressed, it was like really bad. But when he was in a manic episode, he would like apparently be singing and stuff, and they're supposed to be covertly going through like a pass. This guy was legendary. But I mean, he was a brave son. He crazy guy. He would go right in the fray of battle. I mean,
Who would you
he was
consider
tough.
more crazy, Wingate or Churchill? Jack Churchill.
I mean,
I think
crazy.
Wingate is more
He
on crazy, whereas Jack Churchill, I'd put it more on battle crazy.
Jack Churchill was just like one of the manliest men of the war. I don't know how to say. He,
He just wants to fight.
yeah. I mean, is he crazy for going out there with a bow and arrow and a sword and stuff? Yeah, that's just pretty crazy. But I mean,
Or
Wingate
playing
was,
bagpipe on commando raids.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, Wingate went around with an onion wrapped around his neck because he believed it gave like medicinal properties and stuff. Like, oh my god, like it would ward off all sorts of
Probably the
diseases.
only person in the armed forces of the British and Japanese armies that did not either respect or fear the Gurkhas.
Yeah, and what's funny? There's no I don't think anyone's ever written like exactly why, but it's always been suggested in the literature that I've read that he didn't like the Gurkhas because he felt they outdid him. Because he considered himself like a kind, I guess you call it like a survivalist. He was like the most hardcore of the Brits, and he wasn't a racist. That's the thing. Like he really liked his Indian troops. He didn't seem to
He
be racist at
just
all.
because they just did better at this jungle fighting than
Of
him.
course, yeah, they're super. Like they're Captain America compared to him. I mean, you can't compete with them.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, right? Like how the politics of generals was involved at a personal level. I think one of Wingate's successor brigadiers or majors at that time,
Yeah,
with a light brigade, right? Given that they were deep infiltration units, you're going to operate very light. And they literally are ordered by Stilwell to attack an entire entrenched Japanese division in Burma.
I mean, it also it it was a bad situation. I can because everyone loves to shit on Vinegar Joe, but he needed the objective, and the units were there. He assumed that they were trained to do that if they had to, but of course they're not equipped for it. They only have small arms. Yeah,
Look, I
he
get it that the units are there, but wouldn't it, you know that if it's a deep infiltration unit, they're not going to have heavy weapons?
and they're going to take massive casualties, and they did. They were decimated, and yeah,
I
I
think that
mean,
Major literally just stormed over to Stilwell's headquarters and gave him a piece of his mind.
yeah, it was a
I can't recall
massive
his
failure. Yeah.
I can't recall his name. I remembered it, but right now it's just eluding me.
because the issue wasn't so much storming the positions; is they took a position and then they had to defend it. But
Yeah.
they're they have light arms, like they don't have artillery or nothing. So
Yeah, you might just have maybe if you're very lucky, one or two field guns, and that at the smallest calibers.
yeah, your
Because see,
knee
they did have
motors
like a
mostly. Yeah.
yeah, because they did have like a landing strip. So I'm just making the very bold assumption. Mostly would be mortars and your pistols, few grenades, and maybe one or two machine guns at most. Because machine guns are pretty expensive and heavy to
Yeah,
move around. Though at least
certainly if you're out in
Brits,
the jungle.
the Brits at least had they not have something like an MG34 or MG42, which took so much time to manufacture.
Yeah, but the MG42 is one of the best machine guns of World War. That's a
True,
good machine gun.
it is true, but if you were to consider the time it took to make one, the British could actually manufacture
Oh,
three.
I mean, you can't ever like anything that the Germans made. Like it's fantastic equipment. MP40, what do you call it? The STG 44, best modern rifle, probably World War II. But yeah, they could barely make enough of them to fit a unit.
Because of the symbolism of the regimes in fascist Italy and Nazi Germany at that time, the uniforms were actually very important. If you see the British and Americans, they would have maybe one or two uniforms for each soldier, like obviously a frontline gear, and if needed, they would get a cleaner version of the uniform. And they were made from cheaper materials and were more practical in nature, especially the GI's uniforms. Whereas the Germans, they had at least an officer who might have at least 6 to 7 different uniforms for different occasions. Now,
Yeah,
that
let me
is
put
just
up some
like,
of these uniforms.
and you don't even have what do you call the resources and textiles to make so many uniforms. So I think that was one of the biggest problems with Germany. But you know, that was it. Oh yeah,
So let's look at this. Yeah, a few different uniforms here. Wow, it's slow to load. But yeah,
but yeah,
no,
it
the
was.
Germans definitely had interesting uniforms.
They did, and it was pretty good quality. Like, but
Es-
when
Especially
you're in
the
all,
Waffen SS's camouflage is extremely well done.
Mhm. Yeah, but a lot of these guys, right, like the heroes of the Wehrmacht and the armed forces, right, the guys who got the oak leaves, diamond to their oak leaves and all, right. I'm sorry, I probably messed up the high awards, but those are just your Victoria Cross Medal of Honor equivalents. When they had to go and get a medal, they a lot of them would just have to wear like a very fancy attire, and given that they're so utterly exhausted from months and months of campaigning, they can't smoke around the Führer's headquarters, which for a soldier is paramount to suicide.
Yeah, definitely. I always forget to mention the audience. If you're not watching us on YouTube, like especially in this episode, we're just going to be tossing up a lot of random pictures and stuff. So it's to your benefit, and honestly, it helps the channel. YouTube has just more reach. I'm able to find more and more new audience members because, unfortunately, the thing with audio podcasts, as far as reach is concerned, it's kind of word of mouth, and it's very very slow to build up an audience. You have a better chance with YouTube. And then anyone on YouTube, usually they'll come over to the audio podcast platform later because I don't know, they're listening in the car and such. So it helps us out, check us out on YouTube because it helps grow the channel. But yeah, always looking at all these different pictures. The Germans, of course, everyone loves to, go up, talk so much about the equipment, the quality, all that, the tank quality and all that. But again, they couldn't produce to save their lives. They didn't even have a full war economy till like mid 44. So they were never gonna win that way. They're getting outproduced by, like, one of the funniest statistics I think would surprise people is during Operation Barbarossa, like a few months in, the Russians were still outproducing the Germans as far as like number of tanks was concerned. That's how much the Germans were not producing.
But I think one of the people that had an utter lack of love for the Nazi high command was one of their greatest pilots ever. Really love this guy. Hans Joachim Marseille, the Star of Africa, which he was actually practically the second best known Axis person after Rommel.
Yeah,
I mean, the guy got literally 17 RA Desert Air Force aircraft in one day.
that's crazy.
Yeah, and he was pretty much a big Maverick kind of personality. So he actually was the son of a general, was in France, and he did not really respect command and flying with your wingman. Right?
Yeah,
He was a loner, and I think a few times, I think it was Meki Steinhoff who was, I think, at that time a group commander who commanded the unit Marseille when they were in France during the Battle of Britain, and Marseille literally comes back to the base drunk with two French women, all completely tipsy. He grounds Marseille, saying, "You're not flying," but he then also forgot to, uh, you know, revoke his access to taking the car. And the guy was considered a legend for deflection shooting,
yeah,
and like the formation where the Allied aircraft will be going in circles. He was able to dive, launch salvos with uncanny accuracy, and move out, and then time his next run.
yeah.
And I mean, 17 kills in one day. I mean, I think that day he did fly multiple sorties because a single aircraft would not be like a single load of ammunition would not be able to, you know, uh, down 17 aircraft, maybe up to five.
Yeah,
So, granted, the BF 109 that he flew had the advantage of the cannon shells. I think it was said that Spitfire Hurricane 4-5 cannon, good cannon hits, and that aircraft's toast. And yeah, Marseille actually, when he went to meet Goring and Hitler, he was completely unimpressed. He thought Goring was an absolute idiot.
absolutely is. He was.
Yeah, I remember one of my friends was like, "Oh yeah, you can't say Goring." Like I was discussing the episode that we did on the best and worst aerial commanders, and we put Goring from the Luftwaffe,
Yeah, of course.
and he said, "Oh, you can't compare him. He's the CEO. He's just gonna do strategy." I'm like, Goring literally was telling the fighters what tactics they have to follow, regardless of how effective it was. He was going through developments, he was appointing the people, he was berating the pilots. Yeah, he's not just playing a purely strategic role like, say, what a Hitler or Churchill or Roosevelt or Stalin were doing. Right, he's getting more hands-on, right, just beyond the planning. If you're literally going at a tactical level, it's like, okay, you know Messerschmitt's 109, you have to slow down your top speed from 310 miles per hour to 200 miles per hour to escort the bombers. And the British Spitfires are like, "Oh yeah, thank you very much. We can just now, intercept and get the advantage of speed in combat." Which, as you know, in aerial combat, that is a key advantage. And
You know,
Keith Park's Group Number 11 really loved tearing into the Luftwaffe when he implemented those tactics. So that is one thing about him.
since you bring up Goring, I think it'd be interesting just to explain to people, like, just why would we say he was the worst air commander for the Germans during World War II? And I mean, it's such an easy one to do because he suffers from so many classical problems. Like, if you look at it just from a leadership perspective, he's not just the leader of like the Luftwaffe. He's overseeing the Gestapo. He's the guy who is
I don't think he had
basically
a Gestapo, but he did have his own secret
yeah, sorry.
intelligence
The
adapting service.
yeah.
ST, I think.
S
But and
D
I think what was
what does that
very
stand for?
interesting, Hitler knew about it. He knew Goring had this intelligence agency that only answered to him, and he did not do anything, considering Hitler was a paranoia guy who did not want people to get as powerful.
I mean, he created the Gestapo, but was he overseeing it? I mean, you know, because it was his own personal tool against Heinrich Himmler's SS, because they were just spying on each other because Hitler's inner circle was just so dysfunctional. But he's
That was
overseeing
their
a secret
that was
police
their style,
force.
right?
Yeah,
Of
well, yeah.
competing.
Well, that's what Hitler liked. The
Yeah,
whole idea behind Hitler's command structure was, hey, if they're all going after each other, they're not going to kill me. And I mean, I guess you could say that kind of worked. But anyways, so he's overseeing the Luftwaffe. He's overseeing this force in the Gestapo. And then he has this third job where he's basically the only high official in the Nazi party who can work with the conservatives and the industrialists to keep the finances going, to keep people in line because,
I
you
think
know,
he had more power than the minister of economics. He was in charge of the 4-year plans.
he was the second. People have a hard time because they always think, oh, maybe Himmler would have taken over after. No, Goring was definitely going to be the second there. He had the strings for everything, and he was
Yeah,
always the higher official.
the problem was he just loved getting to hear what he wanted to hear, and that's exactly what guys like Beppo Schmidt used to do so well to Goring during the Battle of Britain. Like, that guy would just fill him with complete lies because he doesn't have to deal. Because Goring also had mood swings, right? Because of the uh, Munich debacle, and when he was shot, he got addicted to morphine. So there are periods of great energy and periods of absolute depression.
I mean, like, let's be honest. Everybody in Nazi Germany was taking drugs. Like, if you've ever read
I
that
mean,
famous book, Blitzed, Hitler
or
especially.
God, his Hitler's 1943 cocktail of drugs. I mean,
Hitler. I mean,
it had rat's poison and bull's semen included.
I mean, it's crazy. I don't know if anybody knows. There's a podcast recently for Lex Friedman where he had the author of Blitzed on, who was the guy who specifically looked into the amphetamine use in Nazi Germany for all of the soldiers, but he also looked at like I forget the name of the doctor, Hitler's physician, this Muller or something, and this guy was like experimental and he was doing things with hormone therapy. He was basically Hitler was like a
Theodore Morel.
yes, but Hitler became like a guinea pig for a lot of probiotics, like anything you can name it. This guy was at the forefront, a lot of experimentation, and he was like, apparently at one point all of the carcasses of animals in the east from the slaughterhouses were being sent on special trains because he was like taking hormones from them to like use on Hitler and for his own private medicinal company, and like
And
he was pissing off German high command because he was taking trains that they needed for the Eastern Front.
so
It's
yeah,
crazy.
we don't need to send in troops. A battalion can wait. It's not needed, right?
Yeah, but like, so back to Goring, it's like it's not just, and again, where does he come from? He's this ace pilot in World War I. That doesn't mean that you should be the leader of the Air Force because you did,
It's I think it's the best example we can relate to. It's kind of like football, like football, or for our American audience, soccer
Exactly.
players.
That's great. Yeah, yeah.
The great players do not always make great managers.
Yes, exactly.
I think they're just like in football. I could just think of Zidane and Cruyff, for example, as players who were very good as players and also very good as managers.
It's rare. It's a
It's rare.
rare thing to see. Yeah. And of course, how did he get his position? He just so happened to be, he was down on his luck. He joined the Nazi party. Like you said, he gets shot in the leg and he gets addicted to morphine. He was an alcoholic too. He took a lot of stuff. And was he a womanizer? I don't know if he was the one who was loyal to, like, one of the Nazi officials was actually quite loyal to their wife. I don't know if it was him or if he was just sleeping around.
I,
But
I don't think he was. At least I've not read anything about Goring doing that.
yeah, and he loved to party. But I mean, it was his job. He was the guy
Uh,
that was getting into bed
I
with
mean,
like the crook guys and all them.
that love to party is like during the Battle of Britain. We know it. Oh God. So Battle of Britain, right? So the British are revamping the defenses on their, home defenses. 10th July is what you consider the official start of, the battle. right? I mean, that's just what it's uh, considered. And do you want to guess what is the first day he even visited the northern French coast?
Tell me.
Towards the end of August. It was
Oh
even
yeah, of
after
course.
uh, Adler Tag, right? His conceived Eagle Day attack.
Yeah.
So that is the first time the guy even went to the northern French coasts, where a majority of the Luftwaffe air bases are kept.
It's
But uh,
honestly, it's incredible from every perspective, from a overall strategy perspective, from the logistics, from every what did they think was going to happen with the Battle of Britain? Like you're going to bomb them into submission? There was never a chance. They knew they could invade. Like it's insane.
and he had actually a great chief of staff first, because see, the biggest shortcomings with Goring, he doesn't have a good chief of staff and he doesn't know staff work himself. In the past, I used to be very antagonistic to the idea of staff officers only. This is like based on my own uncle who served in the army and he was more frontline. So, that notion of staff officer. But then I realized, okay, they're not fighting, but they are doing a pretty important job as well.
Yeah, of
Because
course.
translating and organizing units, it's an underappreciated art of war. And then, so when Walter Weaver is killed, he has two guys who kind of like are his main deputies, Erhard Milch and Hans Jesenek. And even though Milch is technically second in command of the Luftwaffe after Goring, that means only he should be answerable to Goring. Goring, to keep that competition, makes Jesenek answer to him, and he doesn't first of all step like he doesn't help optimize production, right? Goring himself. Look at what Lord Beaverbrook did with British aircraft production. In an instant, British aircraft output doubled. Goring, on the other hand, would let guys like Willie Messerschmitt, who was a party man, just push his ideas forward.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just was confusion. And I think once they were and their aircraft just had great ideas, but just was so badly damaged that they were losing quite a lot of pilots in prototype testing. And he approved a design, and then when he finally saw it, right, as a test flight, it was an aircraft. I don't recall the model. So just imagine if this was the wing.
Hmm.
The engines are on top. So it's a four-engine aircraft, but
Yeah.
one over the other or something like that. Maybe I'm mistaken, but that is like, did anyone ever think about how we are going to maintain this aircraft? Because taking apart that engine would be a nightmare.
Hey guys, this is Craig from the Pacific War Channel. Please don't forget to check out my YouTube membership or my Patreon account over at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War Channel, where you can join the ranks and gain access to a hell of a lot of goodies. At the base minimum, you get access to the exclusive monthly podcast, early access to all of my content, voting rights for what subjects I will tackle next, and at higher tiers, I have much more goodies to come. So please click that link and check it out. Do you think the Germans ever thought about logistics when it came to maintenance of vehicles? Like with
No.
what they were going into the Eastern Front with? I, that's one of my favorites. I don't know if people know. I'm not the guy who writes the YouTube episodes for Kings and Generals Eastern Front week by week series, but I have to follow it up with the podcast version. It's the same thing I did for the Pacific War week by week. I just took this other guy's work. Although for the Pacific War, I actually wrote a bunch of the episodes. It's kind of different. But for the Eastern Front, I'm basically following his work and expanding upon it because, I'm turning something that's like 2,000 words into basically like 8,000 words. And it's when you actually sit down as a researcher and you look at the number of different vehicles the Germans during Operation Barbarossa, what they brought into the Eastern Front, oh my God, it's the most duct taped hodgepodge amount of crap you've ever seen. They're using like they're using like a bunch of French trucks and French tanks, Italian models. Like uh, if you just kept it at what the Germans were building themselves, there's still like hundreds of different variations of vehicles. Nothing standardized. It makes
Yeah,
no sense.
I'm trying to find some images of the different types of vehicles
Oh,
because
it's crazy.
and they did not have that much facilities. So despite have it is actually quite funny before World War II broke out. Despite Italy and Germany having pretty very famous automobile names, they were the most under mechanized countries. France, Britain, and the United States. I think w- in US it was like
You can't even compare the US to the rest of
oh
them
yeah,
because the United
I
States,
mean
it's like what every third or fourth person knew how to drive a
he,
car, where in
yeah, and I think
Germany it was 1 out of 20 or something.
oh it's I think there was like one uh car for every 30 to 35 Germans and Italians, whereas for Britain and France that ratio was more closer to 1 in 10 to 12.
And then the United States is killing them all.
Yeah, but see, at least Britain and France still have the base.
Yeah. And I don't know if I think you might have mentioned this on a previous podcast, but one of the funniest things, if you look at it from a logistical point of view for tanks, all the well, it's not even just the American tanks, the Allied tanks were standardized and they could be pretty much operated by someone who knew how to drive a car. You probably could operate it. But for the German tanks, it was so goddamn complicated on how to drive it that you had to be trained. So of course, it's just like you're going to limit your logistics.
So this is, I guess, some pictures of some of the armored tanks,
Oh
and
my
I'm
god, yeah.
not. This is not even getting transport vehicles. I can't recall. There was like this minister appointed just at the start of the outbreak of World War II to standardize cars, because a lot of these, like if you had a BMW car or a Mercedes car or Volkswagen, they, as you mentioned, they have completely different parts, different gear ratios, different axles. Uh, you're not going to standardize that. And when they used, when they started deploying for Operation Barbarossa, they took whatever they could from France, Belgium, Netherlands, the Balkans,
Everything for
and
the Czech vehicles were a
yeah,
big
Poland.
boost to them. Yeah,
And now the problem is they don't have the parts.
yeah,
The
they had nothing.
British, Shermans, Churchills, Cromwells, even the Pershings, they all had the same set of parts. So even in the worst case, if an American tank is just rescued by a British crew, or the British crew is the first to reach out, they will be able to just get the parts needed to get that tank back in action if it's
Have the
possible.
same training. They're all using the
Yeah.
same vehicles. So it's the same crews can pretty much repair just about everything, same parts. Whereas for the Germans, you're sitting there looking at some Czech tank from the 30s. You're like, I don't have the parts for this. I don't know what I'm doing. It's ridiculous. But I'll hand it to the Germans. It was very smart to use this initially in Barbarossa because you just sacrifice all of this extra stuff that you've conquered. Use it. That's great, but they had to rely on it because they weren't fully mechanized, like you said. So they come in looking gangbusters, like they've got all of these vehicles, but it's like in a matter of months, it's all gone. And when they press Hitler for production, Hitler's like, oh, I don't want to upset the civilian population of Germany. We can't just ramp up production because people will think we're losing the war. Well, guess what,
and
asshole?
and the funny thing is, the Ministry of Production had a constant fight on their doorsteps between the three armed services branch. Donitz is continuously pushing for U-boats. Goring wants all the pristine steel to go. And even with the army, if they want vehicles and tanks to be produced, guns, they actually have to sacrifice ammunition production. So it was a really bad situation. And this is actually something I do remember reading with, you know, just before the war, okay? Uh, there was this British guy. He was in Germany because apparently I think he was enthralled like by the Nazis. But on the official declaration of war, he was arrested because now your countries are enemies, and he was let go. So they drive him to the Swiss border, and they take his passport, they take his money and other small items, but they give him back his car. So he's being driven in his car, and there's another German car with the police behind him to the border, and they give him back his car fully. untouched. And he was confused. He asked them, why are you giving this back to me? He said the German officer was like, oh yeah, we don't have parts and spares. Which is pretty prophetic to say, considering this was literally like a week or two since the official outbreak of World War II. And this is just also talk about Britain's industrial might at the same time, because he managed to reach the British embassy in Switzerland. The ambassador's like, oh yeah, you have been called up, so you better get back to Britain and report to your unit. And he literally just gives them like fuel coupons. It's like, yeah, you know, this is more than enough to get you back to Britain at a leisurely pace.
And for those who can't see on YouTube, I actually put up a chart of the tank production per nation during World War II. Which, by the way, scumbag to even put Japan on this. They could have added just Italy instead. It's not. Yeah, the Japanese
You
didn't
mean
produce much tanks. Well, duh. They didn't have a good use for them.
cappuccino machines?
Yeah, the cappuccino machines. It would have been more. I think Italy would have made more sense to put up here, but I get why they did it. But if you look here and you look at the change 1941 to 1942, and let's just show like USSR versus Germany. This is right during the heat of Operation Barbarossa here. It's ridiculous how much just the Soviets are producing at this time, because you can see this is the huge jump, right? They've moved most of their industry past the Urals, and they're still producing what, like
And it's
5 times that the Germans are.
There's absolutely no way the Germans could have ever reached them, because the Germans, I think, when they began planning the OKW and OKH, they knew that they're from the borders. Their operational range is about 300 to 400 miles at most. Right? So you're going to get Moscow. But Stalin just needs to go behind, and that's it. And he already did that. The Even if they captured the Black Sea oil fields, right, in the Caucasus, it would have not even affected Soviet oil production, because
And the Germans
they
would not have been able to exploit it very quickly. That is
it takes
another
time.
issue.
It takes time because you have to set up the facilities and infrastructure, and time is what they don't have.
Not to mention, the Soviets will be throwing every counterattack that they can at you. And the Germans, historically, on the defensive, they don't do as well. They're much better. They're like a glass jaw, you know. They do well on the offense, defense not as much. So it would have not been great for them. Still, you just look at production, and I can switch it to aircrafts. So here's another chart that shows the aircrafts. Here, of course, the Germans
I
did favor aircraft production, so they're doing much
I
better.
was literally about to bring up this exact same image.
Yeah. And as you can see here, Japan, obviously, they produced aircraft much more than tanks. Oh, and Italy is on this one.
Well,
Look at
I
Italy at the
mean,
bottom.
well, to be fair, for Japan, given the nature of where they were fighting, air power made
Of
way
course,
more sense.
absolutely. Tanks did not make sense. But even here, like the Soviets, let's look at 40. Okay, yeah, 41, they're not producing as much because, they, yeah. But yeah, my God, 44, they start really producing. So yeah, the Germans are on par with the Soviets in 41, kind of, for aircraft production. And I know like a lot of people like to knock on the Soviet Union's aircrafts. They weren't terrible. I mean, they're not.
I mean, they're not. They could hold their own.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's Operation Barbarossa. The airfields are the first thing hit by the Germans. So it's kind of like the Soviet, the VVS is just decimated. They're almost out of action for like what, 3 months.
I think the best example of Allied industrial power is, I think I would call it actually the loss of convoy PQ-17 from Britain to the Soviet Union,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because that was an Arctic convoy of 35 merchant vessels, and basically acting on false reports of the torpedoes coming in, the escorts abandoned it on the orders of Admiral Dudley Pound, and the merchantmen were left at the mercy of the U-boats and Luftwaffe. And 23 of the 35 merchant ships were sunk.
God damn.
And no, I'm not even getting the losses in material. and they just would recover. 3,300 vehicles were lost, 210 aircraft, 430 tanks, and almost 100,000 tons of general cargo were lost. Now, those are not insignificant numbers, and
Definitely
the
not.
British and Americans are just going to recover pretty quickly from that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, another thing when it comes to the Soviet Union is the fact that Japan had to allow Vladivostok to remain open and just allow the trade to go in is just insanity. The Americans are like, yeah, it's Soviet ships just taking all of these materials and everything they need to fight your ally, Germany, freely going by you. And the Japanese could do nothing about it because they feared
Because of
breaching the
their
neutrality pact.
non-aggression pact.
The Japanese probably should have breached it, but did not pursue any offensive campaign. Because just opening that as a theater would have been interesting. Because the Russians would have to send one competent general that way. It's not going to be Zhukov, of course, but it's going to be somebody. It's going to take
And
a
definitely
bit
not
of
Gaurav,
manpower.
not
But
Zhugeov.
but as far as an offensive campaign is concerned, the Japanese, they would be stupid.
Yeah,
Take Vladivostok
if
and call it a day.
Japan would have, say, diverted men, say maybe 250,000. I know that's a big chunk of the manpower, but not an immeasurable amount.
Well, the thing is, they're
But
already there in Manchukuo.
yeah,
Like, they're on
yeah,
the border. So,
yeah. But my point is, if Japan concentrated, say, 250,000 men, the Soviets would have to respond by pulling out at least 2 times that number.
well, I did the
Or at
numbers
the
in my
very,
podcast.
uh,
The Soviets retained the base amount necessary to thwart off about 1 million Japanese because they
jeez.
assumed the Japanese were going to attack. They had built the defense system that they had across the Manchurian border was impressive. And people always they love to go into the alternate history and they think it's crazy and they think the Japanese would have stomped right through. No, it would have been terrible. The Japanese couldn't get more than 300 kilometers through the borders. And what are they
It's
doing? There's nothing
and
around.
it's not. Yeah, you need a strategic objective. I'm the only way I would just see this helping is if it would be able to divert away soldiers from the Western Front of the Soviet
The Eastern
Operation
Front for the
Barbarossa.
yeah.
Yeah, Western Front for the Soviets, right?
Yeah. But the
But
thing is,
the only they could have that was the only way I thought they could even support.
I actually looked into scholar work on it, and I was surprised to find this out because the classic story is okay because the Japanese never opened up a front. The quote unquote Siberian Corps came over and saves the day right at Moscow. The thing is, if you break it down, you look at the timeline, they only come in after the battle for Moscow has been won.
I think
They're
they
there for
come
the
in
counter
around the
push.
time for the Zhukov's Stalingrad counteroffensive. I think that's when
Yeah,
they
yeah.
turn
I'm
up.
just thinking of the Moscow one because it was the most pressing threat. Of course, Stalingrad starting up. But what was the name of the operation when they throw back the counterattack in Moscow? The counteroffensive. That's when the
Mhm.
Siberian Corps shows up and they're fresh and blah, blah, blah. They're not, it's not a significant portion of what was in the East either. The Soviets kept I think more than 50% of the troops in the Far East because they still feared the Japanese would do something. But yes, they took some of these good units and they brought them over. But even if they don't come over, it doesn't change anything. It's just the counteroffensive isn't as grand. It's still going to
Or
happen.
no, or at the most, it just means that the Soviet armies are gonna be more defensive.
Yeah, and that would be fine. This wasn't the knockout blow. This wasn't going to make Operation Typhoon successful, for the Germans. There's really not much Japanese could do to really help the Germans, except for one thing that I thought of not too long ago. You maintain your borders, you breach the Neutrality Act, and then you send an ultimatum. You're like, I want Vladivostok, or I'll attack Vladivostok, and that's it. And the Japanese would probably use chemical warfare because they're communists.
You already, anyways, have the units
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. And the Japanese, there's no way the Russians could protect Vladivostok. They're going to take that. And that's the most significant target that they could take because there's nothing else. There's nothing they can
Yeah,
exploit.
even I'm just also thinking geographically, is there anything else?
There's
No, I can't even
technically
think of.
oil. that hasn't been found in Siberia, and the Japanese, who have no knowledge of how to exploit oil, would have no ability, even if they magically found it. No, there's nothing they could do. There's not even trees in Siberia for them to like burn. So it would have been terrible. And again, people always think, oh, but if the Japanese come through this way, there's going to be a pincer and then they'll defeat the Soviet Union together. The distance
huge.
to freaking Midway is less than the distance from freaking Tokyo to Moscow. And you're talking about a country with no freaking oil. How are they going to go 2,000 kilometers through a wasteland that's, no, that's not happening.
I mean, Russia, I think east to west is like 9,000 kilometers.
It's crazy. And
Yeah,
we're talking
like,
about
what
non-mechanized
army's gonna
Japan
move
here.
that much?
Yeah, the Japanese on basically relying on horses, especially in Manchukuo. They have the Mongol cavalry allies and all that. It's like they're not. It's not happening. And basically the Russian defense, the entire defensive operation was a defense in depth. So if the Japanese, broke the front line, the Russians are just pulling back. There's another line, pulling back. There's another line, and there's like another 50 kilometers. They're just further and further lines. It's so stupid. There's a good reason the Japanese never pursued that. Yeah.
Well, and not to mention with Stalin leading them, Russians are not afraid of just throwing their men and getting an entire battalion wiped out to the man.
And they have experience against the Japanese in 38 and 39. They know exactly the capabilities the Japanese have.
And I'm
they
pretty
know
sure the Kuomintang army was scared to attack.
they had developed better anti-tank guns, but compared to every other nation, they were still shit. And they were not going to be able to remotely do anything.
This is before the T-34s even came into widespread service.
Oh yeah, they were fighting T-26s. I'm not good with tanks. I don't know my tanks very well, but
the T-34 only started coming out in
the B1s and the T-26s or something were in the 38-39 conflict. So, yeah,
34 only came out into production, I think, in start of Barbarossa. That's when they first started coming into combat.
I mean, it's the KV-1s and it's the T-34s that the Germans had the most problems with. Everything else is kind of small scale. But yeah, it doesn't matter. The Japanese are as terrible making their tanks as they are facing them. They just, because their enemy was China. China didn't have anything except for a few Renaults and a few old German tanks. It didn't, didn't matter.
They have manpower.
And honestly, the Japanese, what they had they're kind of the best weapon they had was chemical and bacterial warfare. Weapons that all their units carried, but they only used on basically the Chinese, and sometimes I think they used them on the borders of Manchuria against the Russians, but they would never use them against the Americans, fearing the Americans would have better chemical weapons to use against them, which the Americans did. I don't know if you ever heard this, but if you read reports in the U.S. military, they had chemical warfare units attached in the Pacific War.
Yeah, I think Kenji in the Pacific War week by week, some episodes.
I'm the one who wrote that note, yeah.
Yeah, I think you literally chemical mortar battalion, mortar platoon or something like that. I don't recall the exact wording, but I remember that being mentioned.
Yeah, because when you're reading the order of battle for some nonsensical, let's say it's something on, I don't know, Battle Peleliu or something like that, you would just read that there's chemical mortar battalion number whatever and you're like, oh, what's that? And yeah, the Japanese and the Americans had the exact same policy. They had these units who were holding illegal weapons in case the other side used first. They would, it's kind of like World War I a little bit, they would use in retaliation. So the Japanese were petrified because they had some of the best weapons around, but they assumed the Americans had much better than them.
Yeah, I mean, I still always get staggered by the number of forces China committed to the war as well. It's quite an underappreciated aspect.
Casualties per nation.
I remember seeing this right from the KNG Pacific War, this area, first war area. All right, he literally has 50 divisions under his command.
I mean, but it's also nonsensical because China didn't have a standardization. They had a lot of issues because they had different versions of armies. I think I had to explain this to you. They have the route army system. They were basing they had two structures. They had the Soviet way of doing military stuff, and then they had the German way. that's how they were like operating at the NRA at the beginning. And then when they realigned themselves with the CCP went full USSR, so they had the route army system. But Chiang Kai shek was also managing provincial armies on top of his nationalist army. And then there was warlord regional army groups. So it's such a hodgepodge of different armies. So what was a corps, how much was in a corps is like different for whatever army it is. It's all over the place. But yeah, if
Yeah,
you look at the
the
chart,
Russian.
China, shit, it's pretty crazy.
I mean, almost 20 million deaths.
And
Does it include the
civilian,
Civil War numbers as well, or it's just
let me
what
look
we
at the
might just
chart.
do our best case attribution to?
I don't think it includes the Civil War. Oh, this is total deaths as of 1939 population. And if you look over here, you can see that the Chinese and the Soviets, but man, they lose a lot of civilians. It's pretty insane. Wow.
At least the Russians, but the Russian military losses also say it's like what, just under 11 million.
Yeah, but the only thing that I have to say about the Russian losses that people forget during Operation Barbarossa and Operation Typhoon, a lot of the casualties are prisoners of war.
Yeah,
So,
but these are
like, of
deaths,
course,
so
yeah, these are deaths. Yeah, I'm just saying, but like sometimes when you're looking at these
yeah,
numbers and they look so outrageous, you have to remember, like at the beginning of Barbarossa, there's pockets that surrender. That's like more than like 100,000. It's crazy how many people
this-
surrender.
they surrendered armies as a whole, and generally, if if we see even in our ancient history battles, Middle Ages, the kills are a small percentage of the total casualties. It's
Yeah, of
generally the
course.
smallest of the percentages.
Yep. And as for China's casualties, I mean, it's disgusting. The Japanese were fully using chemical warfare on civilians. So famously, the Jiangsu Fujian campaign, which happened kind of as a result of the Doolittle raid. It was kind of a retaliation against the population. Uh, I mean, it's not just Unit 731. There's like multiple other different units that are all across Asia that are practicing all of this warfare using bubonic plague, using typhoid, every kind of like disease, poisoning wells, poisoning like children's candy and handing it out in villages. Like, it's
Uh,
disgusting. It's maximum damage.
that's yeah. But I don't know. One thing about like the Soviets and Chinese casualties is just like if you are losing, you just have one solution: just raise new armies. That is pretty much Rome in the Second Punic War and First Punic War, I might
Exactly.
add.
Yeah, that's pretty much
I
the same
think people
system.
people really need to think about how Rome just survived the Second Punic War, especially in the aftermath of Cannae, because psychologically it was devastating,
Oh, yeah,
and beyond psychologically, their allies did turn against them. Macedonia decided to opportunistically join in
of course,
because as we discussed with Dan, Greeks are never united in the ancient
never.
times.
They like fighting each other more than anybody else.
Yeah, and even in the aftermath of Cannae, Northern Gaul rising in revolt and butchering two legions, they literally just within a couple of weeks after Cannae, 40,000 soldiers are raised for the defense of the Eternal City. And a few months after Cannae, if you include their auxiliaries, I think Rome had 12 to 13 legions in the field. And by 211, which is when we get to the time where Scipio Africanus starts taking command in Hispania,
Yeah,
they're maintaining 25 legions across Italy, Spain, Sardinia, Corsica.
yeah. No, it's a
Uh,
crazy comeback.
and they've taken, it is estimated, I think they lost 20 to 25% of their adult males that were eligible for military age. That's
Yeah,
massive. Uh, they don't have to fight too much in Greece thanks to Lavinus.
yeah.
That guy was. I really love the way he just dealt with them.
And I mean, to be honest, the biggest thing about Hannibal is he never had the support of his own people. Like
Yeah,
his
well,
senate was against him. Like, it's crazy. Like
yeah.
they killed him logistically. They cut his throat when he does this amazing feat. Like it's great that you stormed into Italy
And he
like
got a
that,
port
but
city as well,
yeah,
Tarentum, because you need a port for your supplies. And the problem is the Romans are adapting because I think after Cannae, the Fabian strategy was because Hannibal would still beat units and armies as a whole, but
No, of course, yeah.
these units are going to be like what? They're now what, 2 legions strong at most.
Here,
So it's not a
here's
big loss.
here's a thought experiment. What was a what could a realistic victory have looked like for Hannibal? Could he have left? Like, could he have said, "Hey, this was a punitive expedition in the end, and bye bye"?
No, I don't
No.
think it could have been punitive. He would have to force a surrender because, as you said, his own senate was hostile against him.
Yeah, but he couldn't force a surrender. That was the issue because that was Rome's. They just didn't
The
surrender.
only hope, if you really ask me, was either he managed to go and cement himself properly in southern Italy and start playing a defensive war. But that is a long-term thing. And or maybe he just goes to the city of Rome and just on the hope keyword, hope. The city just is so terrified because of the losses that they just surrender.
That's
Right
a
now,
possibility.
it's very unlikely. And keep in mind, siege warfare in this time in the Western Mediterranean is useless.
Yeah.
Like, I think the best example is the city of Saguntum, which kick-started the entire Punic War. He had an army of 90,000-ish men in Iberia. It took him 8 months to besiege and capture the city. 8 months. Now, are you telling me you're going to be... He's has, immediately after Canny, 40,000 to 45,000 men, right? 40,000 if maybe I just subtract around 5,000 who might be much more wounded. You're not going to cross over and defeat Rome, right? Because if you have to encircle the city and starve them out, your lines are going to be spread horribly thin. But I think that was the only way Hannibal would be, able to gain something.
Yeah.
And again, that's just in hope. But honestly, I think the greatest masterpiece of the war was how the First Macedonian War ended, which was concurrent with the Second Punic War. Because Marcus Valerius Labienus goes there because Rome has a few ports in Illyria and on the Greek peninsula, just ports, so they don't have a big presence there. Philip of Macedon wants that, and he thinks, all right, Rome's down, I can backstab them and take gain at their expense.
Here, one second. I'm pulling up another map that
Yeah,
incorporates
yeah,
the Greek
perfect.
aspects. It's one that I'm a little ignorant about because I learned this so long ago in university. But what was the strategy on the Greek side for how were they going to at least
Okay,
contribute enough to collapse Rome?
so the thing is, it was only Macedonia being
Yeah, yeah,
opportunistic under Philip
yeah.
the Fifth, right? Because you had so the Hellenistic and Greek world, right? See, you already have the three great kingdoms, right? Ptolemaic Egypt, the Macedonian kingdom, and the Seleucid Empire. And then you have like the cities of Pergamon, many independent states, and then two major groups in Greece, which are the Achaean League,
Yeah.
which kind of you could say is like not between Macedon and central Greece and southern Greece, and the Aetolian League.
Mm-hmm.
And typical to how the Macedonian kingdom is fighting its big Hellenistic rivals, it does the exact same thing there with these guys. You know, Aetolia and Macedonia will form an alliance against the Achaeans, and then when one side will then backstab the other and allow the Achaeans to recover and then form an alliance. Typical day in the office. So Rome's strategy, right, where you see on the map, could you zoom in a little bit towards the Greek side?
Wow, that zoomed in a
Like,
lot.
yeah, yeah. I think this is good though. Just can you scroll a little bit up on the map? Yeah, perfect. So you can see where it shows Apollonia and Epidamos. They are both influenced by Rome. Now, what do you need if you want to land a invasion army or transport an invasion army? A port.
It's not important.
And so Philip wanted to capture them. Now, Rome doesn't have manpower to divert to a large. So Lavinus comes, he gives a really sweet deal to the Aetolian League. He's like, oh yeah, you know, you can take it, get whoever you want, you know. But just remember, if Philip beats us and we're off the peninsula, he's going to come after you next and he's going to be stronger. He plays diplomacy. That is the key thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the Aetolians enter into an agreement with Rome, and they're kind of convinced because this is around 212 BC, where Rome has now started to win, or at least I won't call win, but they're holding Hannibal to stalemates and are grinding him down through attrition.
Yeah.
Now they join, and the Romans and Aetolians are fighting, and the Achaeans then decide to join the Antigonid kingdom of Macedonia. Why? Because hey, if Macedonia falls because two stronger players are attacking it, the Achaeans will absorb Macedonia, and then, oh shit, we're next.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do the Achaeans do? They join in on the Macedonian kingdom. What do the Aetolians do after that? They get the rest of Asia Minor involved. The regions we considered in the Ionian Revolt episodes, they all join. Pergamum and some states of Thrace, they all join in. So the Romans just have to keep still in their area, just chill out, and they play defensive. They derail talks so that they keep the forces bottled up here, like the enemy forces of Macedonia.
Yeah. And
And
logistically, as far as like supply is concerned with by the sea, why Rome just had completely shattered Carthage as a naval power? Like they blockaded their ass?
not yet. So Carthage had recovered some of its strength in the naval
Yeah.
theater, but it wasn't as big as a fleet that we would see Carthage sending out in the First Punic War. Like, for example, Cape Economus, where there were like, what, 270 war galleys sent out.
Mm,
It's nowhere near that. And Carthage was mostly raiding in Italy because the alliance between Philip was not with Carthage per se, but Hannibal. So the government in Carthage would probably have not even known about it. And this is see, Philip is just being opportunistic. The problem is the Romans thought of it as a betrayal, even though by ancient Greek standards, this is just like another day in the week.
yeah, seriously.
I was about to say another day in paradise, but I'm like, yeah, that's probably not the right choice of wording. It actually reached a point where the Romans could actually demobilize one of the two legions that they kept in Greece and deploy it elsewhere.
Yeah. I mean, it's an
So
incredible comeback, definitely, the Second Punic War. And it
yeah,
goes
and
it's kind of, I guess you could say, since we were talking about the Eastern Front, I kind of, there is a little bit of a dichotomy between like the idea, oh, if the Germans did
we're
take
not given.
Moscow, would it change anything? If Hannibal went to Rome, like the Senate would just leave. They would just go somewhere else and give up the city at worst,
I
right?
don't think they would have even given up because I think they knew that they will not be captured. Look, Hannibal, unless he literally got a 50, 60,000 strong fresh army to
Yeah, there was no
reinforce
way to
his.
really siege. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because the Latin tribes, unfortunately, still were utterly loyal to Rome.
And like you said, because it's a major port city, it's impossible to actually siege it. So I guess there
There
was
was,
no
there was no,
chance.
there was no coordination between the Carthaginian fleet and Hannibal,
Yeah.
and the fact that the Romans did not have any will to surrender was, I think, needs to be considered. They,
It is absolutely batshit crazy that they hated Hannibal that much that they would not help him. Because effectively, if they were actually intelligent, they were strategically going to go, okay, we're going to march on Rome. You try to do this half-ass siege, and we'll blockade them with the navy. Like, yeah, maybe something would happen, but no,
Without reinforcements, it was impossible, and
yeah,
unfortunately, Hanno controlled the Senate of Carthage, and Hanno hated the Barcas. And that guy was a merchant because Carthage ultimately was only money rules. They're
mm.
a mercantile empire.
Well, they
So
paid the
I
price
think,
for their stupidity.
I mean, it worked until it did not work
Yeah,
because it is literally only Hanno that caused the problems with the mercenary war that happened after the First Punic War.
yeah, jeez. Uh,
I guess Hamilcar actually negotiated and wanted them to pay in pieces. So he was actually just sending the mercenaries from Sicily over in small groups. because it's easier to deal with a force of 1 or 2,000 rebels than 40 to 50,000, and not to mention they are battle hardened veteran rebels.
Mm-hmm.
And Hanno actually just ended up waiting for all of them to come and just say, "Yeah, I'm not going to pay you much."
Well, I was thinking this whole time before we made this episode, what was the title going to be? And I think the title of this episode is going to be something like "From the Eastern Front to the Second Punic War" or something like that, because this has been an interesting blend into two different
They were
histories.
there was wars of attrition,
Yeah, but
and
we've gone on.
Rome could do that. Yeah,
We've gone on pretty long.
yeah.
Gonna repeat to the audience the shameless plug as I always do. Oh, here, I'll take off this map as well. And again, to the audience, I think it's worth your while if you would like to check out the YouTube membership or the Patreon account. I do favor if you go over to the Patreon. It's a little easier to manage, and I think it makes more sense. But over at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War channel, from the lowest tier all the way up, you get access to the exclusive podcast series. I'm actually going to have to put up a poll pretty soon for the next one. The last episode was, of course, a complete rundown of the logistical campaign during the Guadalcanal campaign. So it was interesting for me. I was basically writing the entire Guadalcanal campaign, but from a logistical point of view. And it was an audience member who actually wanted me to do that. But we'll be putting up a poll soon for the next episode. There's like 37 episodes at this point, and they range from anything you can imagine. It's not just Pacific War related. It can go ancient history, modern history, alternate history at some points, even fantasy. There's some Lord of the Rings stuff in there because I write for Wizards and Warriors. And actually, I have a good one here. If anybody wants to really personally help me, go to Wizards and Warriors, go to any of the recent videos, and please comment. I hope you have something for the Alien franchise in the future. Bug Wizards and Warriors for some Alien franchise content, because I've been trying to push the guy who owns that channel to let me write some stuff, and he doesn't want me to do so. So it would really help me. I'm a huge Alien fan. I read all the books and all that, so I kind of want to write that for them. So that would personally help me. But yeah, if you'd like to further support the channel, please check us out there. But hey, you can just support us by coming over and watching us on YouTube, liking, and please comment, because the algorithm is based a lot more on comments, more than ever. So it would help immensely, because we want to grow this podcast to be even bigger. Gaurav, this has been a lot of fun. We'll see if we keep doing this on the side, because I find it's
like
fun.
an occasional just chat.
Yeah, exactly. It's just two guys ranting about history like the nerds that we are. Yeah.
Yeah, next time I want to bash Caligula.
Okay. That could be fun. All right, so you heard it here, guys. Till next time, over and out.